Hi, I'm Tracy Spicer. The colour pink is synonymous with breast cancer, but it's not just women who are affected. Men can get breast cancer too. And it's not just women of a certain age. Increasingly young women, some in their early 20s, are being diagnosed, and many go through the journey alone. We always hear in the media about the survivors, but of course not everyone survives. According to the National Breast Cancer Foundation, 7 people die each day from breast cancer in Australia alone. Thanks to medical research, there are better treatments for those whose cancer spreads. But that also means we have a generation of people living with metastasised cancer for years, effectively living and dying at the same time. How do partners and children cope when breast cancer becomes part of the family? I guess you could call these the forgotten faces of breast cancer, for there are so many shades of pink. These are their stories.
So I was only 21 when I had Melissa, and when I was pregnant, I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl. I was really happy.
Mum and I are best friends. We like to go shopping together, go out for lunch and have cups of tea. I'm a long-haul flight attendant. I was busy travelling the world, just having fun with my friends and my family, and life was great. I lived overseas for 2 years, so I lived in America, Canada and Austria.
When she finally said she was coming home, I was thrilled to bits because I think I cried nearly every day she was away for those 2 years. Yeah.
It was one night I had been over at Mum's house and watching TV, and I came home to have a shower. It was late at night, about 10:30, and I took my bra off and I felt an immense pain in my right breast, and I felt it and found a massive lump, and I could actually see it. It was like a golf ball.
I said, please go straight to the doctor, I'll ring her now. So she did, and then when she came home, before that, it was about an hour later, it hit me. I think I fell to the floor. I think I just about fainted.
Went to the doctors and she started reading out the report, and I heard the words invasive ductal carcinoma, and I knew straight away that I had cancer. Then, Mum said, what'd she say? And I just said, she said I have cancer, and burst into tears.
She said, I've got breast cancer, and all these things run through your mind. You think, oh my God, her beautiful hair. Things like that. Like, that's the least of your worries because you think she's got to go through all that treatment.
Quite commonly, the breast cancers that develop in young women will be the more aggressive forms of disease. We don't really understand why that is.
It just seems to be that triple negative manifests more often in those younger women. It has, a reputation as a more aggressive form of breast cancer and with a poorer outcome.
I had 2 operations. Before I had my operations, I actually did an egg harvest through IVF Australia because the breast cancer chemo drugs actually puts you into a forced menopause. I have 31 eggs on ice. Because I knew I would be off work for a year, thought I'll start to get pretty bored. I'd have lots of time on my hands, and I can't even remember when it came to me to decide to do millinery, but I've always loved going to the races and started making my own fascinators when I was in my 20s, and Yeah, I love it. When I'm sewing, I guess I'm too busy to think about anything else.
The day that she was operated on, we were walking to the car and I got this terrible pain up the side of my throat, and I just stopped and I said, oh, the pain, but I thought it was the stress. When I started to get these funny popping, pulling pains in my groin, I thought, I'll go and see a doctor. And before I knew it, I think it was in February that the specialist said, look, you could have lymphoma.
I went with her the day she was diagnosed. And yeah, that was a really big shock. Well, it was worse for me to hear that she was diagnosed with cancer than it was to hear myself. Yeah.
When Melissa was diagnosed, Brad took her down to Bondi to a wig place and bought her a beautiful wig. So then he took me down a few months later and said, hello, we're here again. This time it's for me.
The first day she had chemo, I was actually due to have my 12th treatment. So we actually would have been having chemo together on the same day. It was only because my chemo had been cut short that I wasn't. So we switched chairs and I became Mum's chemo buddy.
I'm in remission, but there's no cure. They can't tell me when it could return or relapse, but I try to be positive and think, well, maybe I'm just going to be that small percentage that, like Melissa, she's thinking positive and I am too, and you just have to enjoy every day, every single day.
I feel in my heart that it will never return. If it does return, it's generally fatal. I want to make people aware that it can happen to young women or it can happen to men.
Ow! Right, ready? Get you. What's the ball? What's the ball? The ball's coming.
I grew up the son of an army officer. My father was British Army. When I was at school, I really enjoyed my sport. I suppose I was a typical boy growing up in the environment that I was in. When I was in London, I worked in the commercial property market in Mayfair St James's, which is sort of central West End. And I was in the Reserve Army for a while. I played rugby.
We were both at university, and he was at an army bash, and he was all dressed up in uniform and irresistible. So went from there. It was all good fun.
I was up a ladder outside, emptying the leaves out of the guttering, and I was resting against the guttering here. And I caught my chest on the guttering, and I thought, there's a bit of a lump there. And I thought, actually, I remember that lump from a few months ago, but I'd had a scar from about 30 years ago where I'd had a boil lanced on the side of my chest, or just next to my nipple. And I'd assumed it was the scar tissue, which had just grown a bit. And so I didn't do anything for a couple of months.
And I thought, oh gosh, hypochondriac, men, middle age, here we go, everything hurts. And we didn't think much of it. And then later that evening, after he had a shower, he asked me to have a look at it. And I did. And it felt like a really hard, small pebble. So I thought, gosh, that's a bit unusual. But I hadn't heard really of male breast cancer. It just hadn't even crossed my mind. I thought, gosh, well, maybe he should go and have it looked at.
So within a week of seeing the GP, I was being told I had a carcinoma. So when I was told that I had what essentially is breast cancer, it was, for me, that was pretty hard to really understand. Obviously didn't tell the children till I actually went into hospital. But I remember reading to my son Thomas that night, who's my youngest, reading him a book, and him sort of lying on my shoulder, sort of having the book read to him, you sort of think, well, will I be doing this in 6 months' time? So it comes as a bit of a shock.
I was doing butterfly and backstroke.
My daughter, the first thing she said is it cancer and are you going to die? So when you have your daughter asking you, are you going to die? I had to sort of say, well, of course we're all going to die. And, you deal with it that way. I had a mastectomy, a male mastectomy, with the equivalent volume of body matter that was removed, probably about the equivalent size of a paperback book. So approximately that sort of size, about 2 centimetres deep, just taken off.
I remember very clearly the day that Mark made contact and was feeling quite irate about the fact that NBCF didn't pay enough attention to getting the message out about men with breast cancer. So I invited him to come in and see me, and tall, nice-looking, very sort of immaculately dressed fellow walked into the office, and as I invited him into the meeting room, he kind of put down his briefcase and proceeded to strip off his shirt. And I think what he really wanted to do was to just convince me that, the whole experience had been so real for him, and that was a good way to do it. But of course, I was sitting there thinking, my goodness, what are the staff going to think is going on?
I had a couple of friends, and only good friends can say these sort of things to you, which is like, yeah, always thought you looked all right, I fancied a bit of a grope, or, thought you should have been wearing a bra, or those sort of things. If I'm in a backyard pool at a friend's house and I see kids noticing it, my normal retort is I will sort of wink and say I've been bitten by a shark.
I was horrified, but they loved it, and I think the story of the shark attack works well.
The subsequent rollout report that I had was probably from a week from diagnosis on the Friday to the rollout report was approximately 13 days. Now on the way down to the Strathfield clinic, I was feeling very anxious, had about 15 minutes to go, and I turned on the radio and they put on this song by the New Radicals, which it's called Give What You Get, but the catch line is don't give up, you've got a reason to live. Fortunately for me, I was lucky to be told that I was cured, whereas a lot of people, it's obviously they've got to go through chemotherapy. Total elation, went upstairs, thanked all the nurses, got back in the car, turned on the radio. The first song that came out on the radio was Bee Gees' Staying Alive. For me, a raw nerve was touched probably when Angelina Jolie was in the press. And there were quite a number of times over a couple of days where I kept hearing female breast cancer, female breast cancer, female breast cancer. Every time it was mentioned in the press or the media, it was designated with a gender, female. And I thought to myself, how many other cancers have a gender associated with them? They don't. For every 20 million of population, there's about 100 men a year. And I sort of did a little calculation in my head about how many men get injured, in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever. And if thousands of men were being injured every year, it would certainly be in the press. And that's basically what's happening. There's about a 1 in 750 chance that a man will get breast cancer in his life. So I acknowledge that it only accounts for about 1% of all breast cancers. But 1% of all breast cancers is still a lot of lives. So that's what I'm trying to achieve.
Men, check yourselves, but women, check your men. And if you feel something solid like a little pebble, don't dismiss it. Get them to go to the doctor and get it checked. And maybe it'll save lives, because if you get it early, you'll be okay.
Come on, feeding. Come on. Referee, didn't you see that? No, he's got the ball, he's got.
I was working in Germany. I was young. I was about 21 when I came to Australia for the first time in '92. And just fell in love with Australia. I came back in 94, I came back in 96 and fell in love and stayed on. In 2002, I had spent 4 months in Germany, seeing my family and working on a project there. And yes, had a unfortunately short-lived love affair and fell pregnant. Tessa was born in 2003. She was just, as every baby is, perfect in every way, and she was my angel.
Well, we do like to cook a lot, and we just started this, but I play these new songs on the piano, and she's been just doing the left hand, which is a bit easier sometimes.
I had to see our GP for Tessa's immunisation when she was 3 months old. And I just happened to mention that I had felt something under my armpit that wasn't quite right. And so we thought it was mastitis potentially, because I was breastfeeding Tessa. But tests then unfortunately came back with a growth in my breast, and an ultrasound and a biopsy confirmed that it was unfortunately malignant cancer. All the safety and security that you have ever had in your life is gone within moments, basically, and you just feel utterly bereft of a future. You don't know from that day what will happen to you in any day that will come.
I always didn't really understand what she meant with the bad cells until I think I was 7 when I really understood what happened to her.
My mum came to support me through the surgery and the chemotherapy. That was for a period of 3 months. So with a very young child of only 4 months, she took care of Tessa during the day, so I could rest during the chemotherapy cycles, because I was one of the cases where you would, be given the chemo and you would basically be sick for a week. My sister came over after my mum had to go back home and stayed with me for another 2 or 3 months, and that was through radiotherapy that went on for another 6 weeks.
I just went through how would she felt, and did it hurt her, and how much she would be worried. Yeah.
She came out with this question the other day, will I get it? So that opens up another whole can of worms. I said to her, it can be, because no woman is completely without risk. Every woman can get breast cancer, whether you have a family history or not. We don't have a family history. Maybe the olives, Bubba?
She said that I'm always open to new ideas.
Oh, that's good.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's very true. Is Matilda actually doing it as well?
No. Mia said that I'm always positive.
And Eliza, how's she doing? I don't know.
Because we don't work with the 5P. At my school, these girls always say that it might be in their genes. So I'm not that worried anymore, but I'm still a bit worried.
Well, I've just celebrated my 10-year anniversary 7 days ago, and I'm literally now 10 years cancer-free. I have never had a recurrence, which is very, very good news, because statistically, I think, my prognosis was not very good. So I am celebrating survival, and I am truly celebrating life. I would say to young single women, ask for help. Don't think you can do it on your own.
One of the things that people want to draw to our attention is the numbers of single women who are now going through breast cancer utterly alone. And they really wanted us to get the message out about how services are not currently geared up to help them.
I would tell them to be brave and still have hope in them that it's going to be okay.
That was a warm-up.
As a little girl, corny as it may sound, I was always in a Red Cross outfit. That was my dressing up outfit. And when I heard an ambulance, I used to get upset because someone was hurt. And I always wanted to sort of know how to fix. And so it just seemed natural to go into medicine. I always felt a bit guilty that when I was at work, I should be with the boys. When I was with the boys, I should be working. And looking back, I did the best I could. It was November 2000 when my world was eclipsed, and it was a dark time. I felt that something was wrong. I thought that, in fact, I had some sort of milk coming in because I had just finished breastfeeding. It just didn't seem right. A couple of tests were not conclusive, but I kept feeling, no, I've got to follow this up because I didn't feel that it was right. I was consumed with guilt that I was taking up time from my practice to have yet another test, and a biopsy showed, breast cancer. I remember the absolute abject fear that consumed me because I wanted to be a mother. And this was something that was going to, I felt, destroy my family. And I wanted to be there for my boys.
Obviously, when she was first diagnosed, it's quite a shock to you.
I was classed as advanced breast cancer then. So I had 3 months of chemotherapy. Then I had a mastectomy. Then I had radiotherapy. And then I had another 3 months of chemotherapy. So the first bout of treatment was approximately a year.
She's made it, a nice thing to go visit her when she's in hospital. She's made it, knowing that we both do medicine, she's tried to involve us in that process as much as possible.
Your next exam's not till next week.
So we go in and we sit in when she's seeing the doctors or the surgeons, and that's really interesting. It makes it less of a personal thing. It interests you from an occupational perspective too. So that's been quite good in making it less of an intimidating thing.
I can stand there as a doctor and discuss my scans and, which lesion is larger or what has accumulated there. And, it's just like it's not me. And then I get in the car and I fall apart and sob, and I'm the patient.
Nothing is a problem.
Having gone through all of that, I was then touted as a survivor. Always called, Dr. Marigana, the survivor of breast cancer. And I would say to people, yes, you can get through it, and look how far I've come. I think it was nearly 10 years later. And it was actually, I was doing a fundraiser and I was moving a table. So I thought, oh, that was a bit heavy. And I had a pain in my back. My only words were, please look after my boys. Because the scan the x-ray at that stage didn't look very good. And Amanda kept saying, no, we'll get through this. And I'm saying, you look at the scan, look at that. And I just kept saying, look after my boys. I was distraught because Gerald was doing his HSC. And that's what I kept saying to him. I'm so sorry, Gerald, that he would have to have a sick mother again.
The 5-year survival rates for women whose cancer has spread from the primary organ, namely the breast, to other organs like the brain, lungs, liver and bone, are not very good. They stand at about 20%. So it's really important, again, that NBCF is funding quite a bit of work into that area of metastasis and understanding how the secondary tumours develop, because it's a really complex process that nobody understands well today.
We have kind of left those women that face secondary breast cancer when it's metastasised, when it has spread, when the chances of survival are so low. I think that we all like to be optimistic.
When Mum was diagnosed with secondaries, that was probably the biggest shock. But then, it does get incorporated into your life. But with the recent septicemia and all of that, it does kind of bring you back to reality because, as I would said, Mum is mortal and you don't realise because she does such a good job in coping with it all.
She goes to the gym as much as me, so that's an impressive effort. So I haven't noticed it.
She hasn't quite got the biceps yet. She's getting there.
She'll get there.
When I had the septicemia, the infection went to my prosthesis, so I ended up with a chest wall abscess. And my beautiful plastic surgeon, David Kaminer, was so kind and said, we can't control the fever, we have to take the prosthesis out, which was my Dolly Parton. And I said to him, I have to have Dolly back. So all my friends had a countdown to when Dolly Parton 2. And I actually wanted to put that on the consent form, that it wasn't a reconstruction and, prosthesis. It was Dolly Parton 2. So we had a Dolly Parton 2 party.
I'm looking at going into reconstructive surgery in one way because, Mum and I often talk about it, how fascinating the process is and what it meant to her to have the reconstruction. We had the bra car since I was about, 11 or 12. It was just normal to me to have a bra car. I don't know, bras have held much less of a fascination for me than most other men, I would imagine, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm still not that good with them, to be honest, but yeah.
Fundraising has always been my meta for loving my boys. I don't want my boys to have their wives go through this, or their children. And I believe that Smash One will smash them all.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing Mum shows to everyone is that she just is incredibly generous.
The fact that she went out to the ball recently on a drip when she was in hospital. So yeah, I'm sure that did help her when she was in hospital. It gave her something to strive for, to be well for.
Of course, I have fears. I fear my boys not having me in the future for something that might be they need me for, or something gorgeous. I fear not being a grandmother. I would have, loved to have done that. And I look at that and I go, okay, my power comes from this, that I live today. And when I get the whispers of the scans coming up, or what if I'm not here? I go, yes, but I'm here now.
From a distance, she was cracking. A good sort, the Aussies would say, wouldn't you? She would always light up a room. She had such a wonderful smile, and people would always fall in love with her. And I don't mean necessarily in love, but they just loved being with her.
She'd always show me sort of her videos of her on the cruise ships with all her big bedazzled feathered costumes, and it was always just so extravagant. And then I'd sort of go to my dress-up box and we'd dress up together and do like a little performance or something, or we'd show to my dad or to friends. So yeah, it was like I grew up with her dancing sort of inspiration. She was kind of my idol to what I wanted to be when I grew up.
We moved up to Brisbane here, and 2 days after that she found the lump. We all jumped into the pool and had a swim around. Annie went up to have a shower, and Laura and I were still playing in the pool. And Annie shouted from the window, and I remember it so vividly now. She just shouted, "Mark, come upstairs," and it was that sort of very special tone. You don't ask any questions, you don't say why. And she said, "I found a lump," and my stomach, I can still feel it now, it's happening now, just fell to the floor, and she said, "Please touch this," which I didn't want to, and as shaking hand as I am now, because I can still feel it. I touched this lump and it felt cold, just like a stone.
I was just really naive at the time because I was so young and I didn't understand the full seriousness of it.
I went part-time. Lucky to have my own business so I could do that, and my partners were sort of understanding. And that meant that I was able to spend a lot of time with Laura, which was great as well. Annie had 4.5 years of remission. She was planning for a celebration for the 5-year anniversary, which is obviously a key milestone in breast cancer. And I didn't want to, because I always think it's tempting fate. And unfortunately 2 months before that date, she'd been having a bit of backache, went for some x-rays, and the report came back with Annie. She didn't want to open it. We got an appointment to see the specialist the next day. Being the type of person I am, I did open it. And the word that just jumped out at me was metastasised. I never actually at the time ever thought about people asking me how I felt. I was, I suppose, being typical POM, typical male, stiff upper lip, everything's fine. But yeah, thinking about it with hindsight, I think it would have been nice if someone had maybe said, "And then really, how are you going?" And they may have done, but it never actually struck home to me. But I never really needed that.
But I thought about my brother, because not long after I began working with the foundation, my sister-in-law was diagnosed, his wife. She was 35 with 2 young children. I called him on the phone and I said, "You know, I'm thinking about what it was like for you to go through the breast cancer diagnosis and the treatment for your wife. And, you know, you made us all laugh and it was really fun, and I don't remember it being so hard for you, and I imagine it was, but I've never had this conversation with you. And what was it like? Did you have support?" And he told me that he was completely panic-stricken through the whole process. He had 0 support. I mean, she didn't have much support back then either, but he had nothing. And so to kind of, that really opened my eyes to, wow, they are the sort of the silent sufferers, the ones that are alongside these women and men as they go through these journeys.
I felt that I had to be strong for my mum and for my dad too, because I knew that he was struggling with it. And yeah, I never really thought about me. I just got through it. I sort of just dealt with it, really. I didn't really talk to too many people about it. It was, yeah, like it just wasn't really about me, and I didn't think it ever was.
Some just very vivid memories when Annie died, but also a few days before she died, having to tell Laura that this was it. Those were probably the hardest times. And then the final evening we were sitting, Annie was in the television family area, had a special bed for her, and we were just sitting watching videos together, Laura on one side and I was on the other side. And for some reason I took a bit of video of it, and just to see Laura just acting normally with her mum, gave her a kiss goodnight, but to think of that strength, that she'd be able to do that.
I'm bedtime now, come on, let's go.
The evening Annie died, it was Laura's graduation, and things were very close. We were very lucky that a friend could take Laura to the graduation. I'd promised I'd be there. I promised Annie, no matter what happened, I would go. Just lucky to be able to be holding her as she died. I then had to get ready to go to the graduation, which was a bit of a fight. I walked into the room, and I think there were sort of 200 people in there. Saw Laura's beaming face, and she said, how's Mummy? And I said, everything's okay. And it was, and he was at peace.
And he's so supportive, and I couldn't have asked for a better dad, really. And we just we get through things together, and we just battle it out together. We get along so well, and we have like our little moments together, but yeah, I'm so lucky to have him.
The thought of people going through what we've been through really hurts. As everyone knows, early detection makes all the difference. And given those statistics that I was told after Annie had her operation, I've got no doubt that if Annie was diagnosed just 2 months before, she'd still be here.
If you go to a dinner party with 8 of your friends, at least one of them will be diagnosed with breast cancer by the age of 80.
I get shocked if I'm doing an interview and I get that question, and I've had it a number of times. Don't you think breast cancer gets enough? And I just say flat down, I'm not making excuses for the fact that we have raised awareness and we are raising funds, and we're doing everything we can to fund research so that we can find out more about this disease. When I see a woman and she looks me in the eye and she says she's got breast cancer, I am not going to say, oh, sorry, we can't look after you, because there's too many other things to do.
So I think it's really important that we do everything in our power that everybody can feel included in the pink community, and particularly here at NBCF, that everybody can own the results of the research.
When cancer cells metastasize, so when they move to other parts of the body, they can often go through a very long period of dormancy or sleep, where for some reason they can't grow the way they were growing in the original tumour. And we think that's because they need to work together with the surrounding tissues that they find themselves in, whether that's the lung, the brain, the bone. In breast cancer, that period of sleep can be years. So we think that's a new window of opportunity for us to find those rare cancer cells that are asleep in the metastatic tissues and intervene and try and kill them before they can grow out into a new tumour.
This year I was actually given a National Breast Cancer Foundation Early Career Fellowship to undertake my focus of research, which is understanding the ways in which cancer cells survive in the body. Now, if we understand the ways in which they survive, we can potentially develop new treatments to target the cells and kill those cells and eradicate them from the human body. Call me the cancer cell terminator.
I think probably the biggest change in this area of medical research is the technological developments that have taken place in the last 5 years. The tools that have become available to us are really kind of mind-boggling in the power that they give us to start to crack open some of the black boxes. And I think probably the key technology that's developed has been the ability to decipher the complete genomes of people and their cancers. And what that lets us do is understand, catalogue every mutation that a cancer has, which lets us predict how that cancer will behave.
I did think when we had this deadline of 0 deaths by 2030, which we believe is achievable, because if you look at the numbers we've achieved over the last 18 years, if we can just replicate the same, then it's an achievable goal. And I did think about my daughter and thought, wow, she'll be, 18, 19, 20. And to have young women grow up and not have to have that on their mind would be an incredible thing.
So the breast cancer movement came out of the women's movement and has been very successful. It tends to focus very much on the woman and often on women like me, older, in their 60s, and who will tend to become survivors. Today, the demographics of breast cancer are changing considerably. There are really far-reaching repercussions on all the people around the woman. I'm really hoping that the documentary can give an insight into that complex kaleidoscope. Muhammad Ali once said, "If your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, then you can achieve it." So I think our researchers' minds can certainly conceive it. I think our supporters' hearts can certainly believe it. So I fully expect that we will reach our goal of 0 deaths from breast cancer by 2030.